Church, my question for Morgan is this. What's the point of being physically present when you're emotionally unavailable? I've got my notes. I hope y'all got yours. Let's get on into this damn mess. All right, y'all, so let's jump right on into our hot topics and talk about this impromptu couples event. So, baby, the men was in one apartment trying to hype up Binh, and the women was in the other apartment trying to hype up Morgan. But as we all know, baby, the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. It's always three sides to every story. Your side, their side, and the truth in the middle. So the women decided, we done finished hyping up Morgan, okay? So let's Tootsie roll on over to the men's apartment and try to, interject ourselves in their mess, okay? Now, baby, was it me or did y'all think that when they came into that apartment that it was going to be some drama? Like, I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but it actually ended up okay, right? Because you need to hear both sides of the situation. But I was largely unconcerned about, the drama that was going down, and my mind instantly traveled somewhere else. Now, y'all go with me for a second because, sometimes, baby, I got the damn ADD and I can't focus. But when them women came into that apartment, was it me or did y'all think that it was the Spice Girls descending upon the men's fun? Okay, like I literally went somewhere in my head. I wrote down all five Spice Girls names and I said, listen, there's five Spice Girls and there's five, women in this damn experiment. I'm going to name which one is which. So listen, you got Posh Spice, right, which is clearly Stacia. You got Sporty Spice, which is clearly Alexis. Baby Spice, I'm going to give that to Lindy because it's kind of like the one that's, semi-innocent with a bit of danger and a bit of, I said last week that basically she's like a boiling pot of crazy ready to overflow, but it's in a cute package to start. So I thought Baby Spice was good for her. Now, Scary Spice, y'all know exactly who this is, okay? And it's going to be Morgan. Morgan, barrels into the room like a lumberjack, baby. She's not very graceful. She's taken Binh through a whole bunch of stress, struggles, and strife. She has a very stern exterior. She's largely scary. She's emotionally unavailable. Okay, I know I'm being one-sided. Okay, I'm just having a bit of fun. I poke fun. But listen, in my fun, there's always an element of truth, so catch that. But I definitely feel that she's Scary Spice. Y'all drop down in the comments and let me know if you agree. And as far as Ginger Spice, baby, listen, by default, it becomes Krysten. Now, maybe there's a piece of gingerness to her hair, but truthfully, I done ran out of Spice Girls, and Krysten, you apparently just drew the short straw, mama. Now, let's move on to these general couple updates so I can get back on track, okay? And let's talk about Morgan and Binh. So the couples this week, they sat down with Dr. Pepper. So once again, great to see an expert show up. I love me some Dr. Pepper. And I feel like, she's a very motherly figure that gives people good advice in a very calm, kind of elegant based way, right? Like when Dr. Pepper says something, you really take it to heart because it feels like she cares in it, like a mother, So, she talked to each of the couples, and I'm just going to break this into three sections per couple. So we're going to talk about the advice that she gave to, the woman, the advice that she gave to the man, and also, they had this experiment or this exercise where they wanted them to write letters to their younger selves. So we're going to talk about that in terms of the dual experiences. So for Morgan, Dr. Pepper basically said that I validate your feelings, but you're not blameless in this situation, which is essentially what we've been saying from the get-go, okay? You are right to feel the way you feel, but it's not often the action that happens. It's kind of like the follow-up to it and the after effects of it, right? Because when you get hurt, it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be downtrodden. It's okay to feel a certain way, but you have to find a place to go from there, okay? There has to be a life after the pain, okay? And from Dr. Pepper's perspective and from all of ours for the large part, Morgan does not create a space for forgiveness, okay? It's you hurt me, I'm putting my walls up, and I cannot go any further, right? And baby, that's not the point of the married at first sight experiment. Because if you wanted to keep your walls up and, move from the next dude to the next dude to the next dude, you did not have to come on TV to do that, okay? You could have done that on your own time. So going to married at first sight is trying to approach relationships in a different way than how you've historically approached them, right? So, validate your feelings, but you're not blameless in the situation. Now, for him, Dr. Pepper basically said, his overwhelmed feelings led to erratic behavior. And, that's clear to see. When you're thrust into the married at first sight experiment, granted he signed up for it, I recognize that, but you're instantly matched with someone that you're unsure of if they match your ideals for what you wanted in a wife. You're unsure if your personalities connect. You're unsure if your life ideals connect. You're unsure if your, career goals and where you see yourselves, if that connects, okay? So your overwhelmed feelings resulted in erratic behavior where you're making her feel a certain way, you're going externally to try to fix the problems in your relationship, and you're kind of just creating a whole perfect storm of drama to kind of befall your whole situation, right? Notwithstanding that whole Justin thing, because I fully validate when the men were together and they were saying, it's not out of the realm of imagination for someone to need to go to their friends to talk about their relationship. And I've said that from the beginning. I don't have a problem with Binh going and talking to someone. Just talk to the right person. That will not basically create more grenades and more problems in your relationship than what you started out with. So it's not basically that you're talking, it's who you're talking to and who you trust with that damn information. So I validate that Justin is a good friend to Binh. I just don't know if he's a good friend in the vein of a safe space to keep your damn innermost thoughts, right? So essentially, he's unsure in his relationship, and it creates this, erratic behavior. And furthermore, he doesn't feel safe with Morgan, because going back to Morgan, if she doesn't create a safe space for us to kind of, reflect on what happened and find a way to move forward, then exactly how can I feel safe with you to find a path forward, right? I don't feel safe coming to you, so I go to Justin. Clearly, I'm not safe with Justin because it gets to Alexis and then gets back to you. But I also can't come to you because the minute something happens, your walls are up and you're not hearing what I'm saying. No inputs are able to go in, and you literally just keep a stone demeanor. So it's very hard to argue with a brick wall when the brick wall cannot basically do anything for you, right? So like I said, they basically gave them an exercise to write a letter to their younger selves. And so Binh, of course, poured his heart out into his letter and read his letter to Morgan. And we find out that Morgan basically didn't do the exercise. Now, Morgan, if I'm going to put my Olivia Pope hat on, mama, we have to find out what you basically want in this situation. Like, what do you want? Because do you want to fix things, or do you want it to kind of like fester and go by the wayside? Because in a realistic mindset, right? In order for healing to occur and in order for us to get on the same page, you have to create an environment that's conducive to that. And listen, I can only give you what you give me. You barrel into the room, okay, like a linebacker. You sit down. You never say hi when you walk into the apartment, since the drama has happened with you and Binh. You never say hi. You sit down, you sigh, you look at him, he starts talking, and it begins from there. Your face stays in a stone-faced demeanor. You play with your hair the entire time. And I know that's kind of like nervous energy or anxiety or just, not trying to be present in the moment, right? So, you barrel in the room, you have a stone-faced demeanor, you don't say hi, you sigh, you play with your hair, you're just not present, right? And it's not enough to just be physically there, right? Just being physically there is only half of the game, okay? In order to fix things, you have to actually be open to fixing them, which means you have to be emotionally available. I understand that the man hurt you. I understand that you feel a certain way, but you're going to have to give an inch if you expect this to go any sort of yard, okay? So you have to decide what you want. And for me, the whole showing up, but not really mentally showing up, you're going to be doomed from this point forward. So either call it quits or find a way to move forward. I'm not saying you have to completely open up to the man, but I'm just saying you have to give him something in order to feel like, he's making progress or he's getting somewhere, because eventually it's going to come to the point where you don't want to give anything. That's cool. I don't want to give anything either, and we can just call it quits where it is. And I'm not sure that that's what y'all really wanted to do, because when you signed up for this process, you wanted to do something different, and it would be a shame if it kind of gets derailed because you can't get past hurt in order to see the forest for the trees. Now let's move on to Alexis and Justin. So for her, Dr. Pepper basically says, don't just forgive and gloss over problems. Heading back to kind of last week and the breakdown at the table, it kind of just summed up into a loss of communication, right? And it's kind of like that whole perception of behavior mindset, right? Because if Alexis had shut down in a sense and she's not communicating how she actually feels, then all Justin can really do is go by her nonverbal cues, right? She does not want to talk. She says she just wants to move on to the next thing. So what he does is he internalizes that as, she's not happy with me, and because she's not happy with me, I need to address it right there. Now listen, I don't believe for 1 second that Alexis had absolutely nothing to say. And I think that narrative that she's trying to run with is trying to pull the wool over our eyes, okay? Like, at a certain point, you have to call a spade and say exactly why you didn't want to speak at that table. And I'm a firm believer that she didn't want to speak because she didn't feel like having a damn argument, right? And she kind of alluded to that with what she was telling Dr. Pepper. I just felt like I didn't want to hurt anymore. So in order to stop hurting, I just forgive and I move on, right? But in that instance, you never fully get to the root of the issue. You just move on to the next one because you don't want to be vulnerable. And basically what she tells Dr. Pepper is that vulnerability and sensitivity is synonymous with hurt for her. It's synonymous with danger. It's synonymous of a place that she doesn't want to be in. And I can basically go with her, in that mindset. I've honestly felt sometimes in relationships that, if I open up, if I show all my cards, if I'm completely, open up to these people, then that's how people can hurt you. But what? Love is giving someone the ammunition to hurt you and trusting that they won't, right? So if you signed up for this process, you signed up to be vulnerable, you signed up to be sensitive, and you signed up to do something different than what you've historically done before. So just like Dr. Pepper said, don't just forgive just because you want to gloss over the problems. Figure out what the actual issue is, address it, and then move forward. Because if you don't, it's just like putting a Band-Aid on something that will never heal. Eventually the Band-Aid will come off and the issue is still there. Now moving on to him. For the most part, y'all, it seemed like she gave him a pass. Listen, that man was already crying and emotional because, he had to give up his dog. Now, apparently, Maya done went to doggy rehab and the prognosis was not good in terms of her attacking and biting and, acting a fool. And so pretty much after 7 years of having a pet, Justin had to make the tough decision that, for the betterment of Maya and the betterment of his marriage, it's probably best if she stays over there. So definitely a hard decision, and I don't want to gloss over his emotions in the slightest, but I really feel like Dr. Pepper gave him a pass in that moment because he was already emotionally raw, and I think piling up on that would have been a form of harmful violence. It would have been largely cruel in a sense. Now, onto this letter thing, it seemed to be the battle of the strong Black woman on the Alexis side. Now, listen, we've heard this for years and years and years. Like, Black women are so strong. Black women, they can't show, their emotions. You have to be the strong Black woman. And isn't it interesting how a lot of this behavior is inherited, right? I see my mother do this. So basically, since I've never seen her cry, since I've always seen her be strong, since I've always seen her be a boss woman, I realize that that's how I need to approach all of my situations, right? But it kind of puts you in a kind of like a dearth of character, right? Because you don't ever get that emotional, kind of the emotional knowledge that comes from being sensitive, seeing someone cry, seeing someone be emotional. Like, you don't get that facet of yourself because you're so focused on, I need to be strong. I need to show a tough exterior. I can't let people see me sweat. So very interesting conversation there. Not something that's kind of unique to her experience, but definitely something that the larger Black community can kind of, you know, see, accept, and realize it's a part of our culture in terms of how we've shown up in the world. We've kind of had to have a rough exterior in order to get where we needed to go, right? So it's kind of like unlearning those patterns and those behaviors that we've had historically through generations and trying not to make them impact our current relationships and put us at a disadvantage in terms of eventually being happy, right? Now, on the Justin side, it seemed to be his battle was Mr. Figure It Out Yourself. So, from what Justin was saying, his brother was largely responsible for raising him, right? And listen, when you have a 19-year-old brother that's raising you and you're 13 and he doesn't really listen, that man probably didn't have the damn solutions himself, okay? So he basically said, when there was an issue, my brother always told me, figure it out, okay? And that's what he's always done. And so when you think about that, if I've always been told to just figure it out, then I've also been programmed not to ask for help, right? So it kind of lets you into the psychology of why Justin approaches problems the way that he does. He tries to figure them out on his own, right? And then when he kind of gets caught out in the weeds or caught in a space where, you know, he doesn't know what to do or he's been caught at a disadvantage, then comes the attack, right? So just like Alexis, it's unlearning bad behaviors, and not necessarily bad behaviors, because some facets of what his brother taught him in terms of figure it out yourself has made him who he is today and has made him a go-getter, right? So you kind of have to dissect the good parts from the bad parts. The bad parts will leave you disadvantaged in a situation, and the good parts will let you, you know, go forward and be a productive human being. So definitely an interesting conversation on their end. Now on to Stacia and Nate, baby. Let's talk about Dr. Pepper's advice to her. You didn't marry yourself. I think that's a very important point, and I think that I've pretty much largely been saying that as we've gone on in these weeks. You know, Stacia is used to results, okay? She's used to relying on herself. She's used to her state of mind, and you didn't marry yourself. You have to be cognizant that this is a whole other person. This is a whole other human being with a whole other background, and you have to be conscious of his upbringing. Everybody did not grow up like you. Everyone will not approach a situation like you. So you can't always put so much pressure on someone else to act how you would in a situation. And on to her advice for him. It was basically to open up, ask more inquisitive questions. And one of the pieces of advice that I love that she gave was to hold hands during, you know, conversations that are difficult. If you think about it, just the psychology of it, right? Like, if you're already physically distant from somebody on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of your point of views on a subject, and you also have that emotional divide, because when we're in an argument with somebody, it's not just the physical distance, it's also the emotional distance, because we don't feel like they understand our point of view, right? But if you hold hands with someone, you kind of decrease that emotional distance that's there, right? You can feel somebody, it's tangible, they're a real person, they're right next to me, and that inherently lowers down some of your defenses and has you talk to them like a real person versus somebody that's your enemy in a situation. So I'm going to use that in my damn relationships the next time I find a man. Okay. Moving forward, let's talk about this whole letter situation, right? And so for both of them, their letters seem to be surrounding this whole notion of struggling to fit in for both, not standing out in their respective environments. And although I don't want to minimize the effect of their letters, where I actually learned more about each of them was when they showed their backgrounds, right? When Stacia was sitting with her best friend's family, and basically talking about how they took her in during her last year of high school and helped her to finish the school year in her same environment. I guess this is around the time where she emancipated herself. They kind of glossed over that, but listen, all's well that ends well, baby. But the central thing I want to talk about here is just the notion of fatherhood, right? Because Stacia did not grow up with a father, so kind of through her best friend and through living with that family, she got a taste of what a father is supposed to be. A father is someone that's supposed to protect me. A father is somebody that's supposed to show up for me. He's supposed to, wait up for me if I need to, go out with somebody, and he waits up until I get home. Like, he's a protector. He's also somebody who teaches me how I should be treated in a situation with other men. So there's so many valuable lessons that fathers teach their daughters that, Stacia probably largely didn't get because of her upbringing. So I was glad that even in a small piece of, the puzzle, she did get a little piece of it with her best friend's family. But the one that basically opened up the waterworks for me was Nate opening up about his childhood. Baby, that scene with Nate, his father, and Stacia in his neighborhood. Listen, I do not cry often. I'm not going to sit here and lie to y'all and tell y'all that I bawled during the damn episodes, but I did tear up a bit, okay? Because it was such a powerful moment and such a powerful conversation and such a conversation about generational trauma, right? Like, just think about it. Nate's growing up. He said he was the awkward Black European kid. Now, I don't know about the European part, baby. I thought his mother was from Japan or Asia or something like that. Y'all drop down in the comments and let me know if I basically made that up or gone off on a tangent, but let's go with what he says. He said he was the awkward European Black kid, right? He didn't know where he fit in. Mom abandoned me, right? The next woman that my father married, she, they got divorced, that relationship dissipated. So that's the second mother figure that's gone, okay? My father is a military dude. He's not very well versed in emotional availability, right? But what he did teach us was how to be there for your family, how to be present, and how to be a man, okay? So those are the lessons that I got from my father. And baby, when that father walked out and started tearing up, and Nate is like, yo, this is the first time I've ever seen my father cry. And the father said, listen, I was figuring this out in real time, okay? I can only give you what I was given, and what I was taught was that men are supposed to be strong, men are supposed to take care of their families, and that's what I did, right? I gave you what I had. Such an emotional, such a valuable lesson, and such a lesson in terms of, parents are human. Okay, they are literally human. They are the sum total of their life's experiences. They cannot give you what they did not have, but what they try to impart to you is the essential elements of what you need to survive, right? I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that's what it is, okay? So, Nate's father did the best that he could, and I hope that in learning about Nate's background, in terms of always feeling like he didn't belong, in terms of always feeling like he didn't have that motherly aspect, and he just had to keep showing up, because that's what you did in the world. You showed up as a man. You showed up to show that you care. I hope that Stacia can realize that, they didn't have similar upbringings. Nate's going to approach problems differently, but just because it doesn't look like how you need it to look like doesn't mean that it's not valuable. And I think that's what that scene showed. I'm glad that she got emotional. I'm glad she was crying and basically using that man's t-shirt as a damn napkin. But listen, all's well that ends well. And I think that kind of gave Stacia more of the emotional side that she felt she was lacking from Nate. So wonderful scene and wonderful story to be told. Now on to Krysten and Mitch, y'all. Let's talk about the advice for her, which was the overcorrection. So this is what I've been saying the entire time. If Krysten does not show exactly who she is and what she wants, eventually it's going to come to a point where the real Krysten comes out. It's jarring, and it kind of puts Mitch off of the whole situation. And that's essentially what Dr. Pepper was saying. Your overcorrection can come off as demanding, right? I don't want to please you anymore. I want to know where we stand. I want to know, if you're going to love me by decision day. I want to know how you feel about me, XYZ. And Mitch is already someone that, does not communicate effectively all the time, and also is prone to commitment issues and running, right? So when you were constantly going along to get along, right, and then you suddenly overcorrect, that jarring response can kind of set off a fight or flight in him. And that's really all Dr. Pepper was trying to say. She was saying, listen, it's okay to correct in terms of, reversing course action and trying to get back to what makes you you and not feeling like you're always absorbed in his world. But you kind of have to ease into it gently so as not to spook Mitch, right? That's essentially what she was saying. And for him, she basically encouraged him to show affection, which is the whole notion of if you feel it, say it. Like, she's an emotional creature. She needs those kind of inputs in terms of knowing how she stands with you, how you feel about her. And because you place those seeds of doubt from the get-go in terms of attraction, you're going to need to be a bit more verbal in order to overcome those initial thoughts of doubt that you placed in her head. So really good advice. And on to the letter. Krysten was Miss Perfection. So just think about it. She was Miss Perfection and he was Mr. No Structure. So when you have one person in the relationship that was forced to kind of take on this people-pleasing mentality, this perfection mentality. I always have to be the best at what I do. I always have to be number one at whatever I do. And then you have the person who's literally the antithesis of that situation in terms of, I was a latchkey kid. I was a, do whatever you want type child. There was no structure and I created the rules as I go along. Then you can definitely see how when someone comes that kind of infringes upon or kind of challenges that mindset, how the natural reaction for someone with no structure or someone who has always created their own rules is to immediately attack that thing and distance themselves from it, right? So a great scene in terms of, when Mitch was reading his letter and kind of breaking down, because it showed that he did have those emotional walls up. He did wall himself off from, that emotional depth. And through this process and through who Krysten is and through her essentially challenging him, he's had to confront that side of himself and kind of lean into it more. So great, definitely a great scene with them there and definitely some great transparency and open honesty between the two of them. I really loved it. And on to Lindy and Miguel, y'all. For her, Dr. Pepper said you need to distinguish control from help. Nothing new here. Lindy escaped from basically the whole religious Seventh-day Adventist church that she kind of grew up with. And it seems like whenever anything comes into conflict with her freedom, she views it as someone trying to have control over her. Even something as simple as when she was talking about she was sauteing, I guess, some spinach and some spices in the pan. And Miguel said, finish sauteing those a little bit more before you throw the spinach in. And it was this whole big rigmarole in terms of, I can do this and I can do that and you can't tell me what to do and blah, blah, blah. So you kind of have to unlearn bad behavior sometimes in terms of every single time someone's trying to give you constructive criticism or help you in a sense, they're not trying to control you, right? So interesting conversation there. And for him, I don't know. I think Dr. Pepper kind of started that whole conversation with Lindy and Miguel in terms of y'all seem to be going on a good path right now. So I'm just here to provide whatever help I can. And for him, I don't really feel like she gave him any advice other than being comfortable to go deeper with his feelings, right? And so nothing new there in terms of, him trying to be, I guess, more of himself without spooking Lindy. It's kind of like that whole situation with Mitch. If Miguel is exactly who he's, historically been, it's kind of abrasive, right? Because he comes at situations in kind of a pessimistic mindset, and that initially puts Lindy off. So I think that in a way, Miguel has been trying to meter who he is in order to let the relationship have a chance at longevity, right? But you come to the point in time where you can't be fake for so long. And I'm not saying he's being fake, he's just being an altered reality and or a minimized version of himself for the greater good, right? But eventually you're going to have to go deeper and someone's going to have to see you at your ugliest, at your best, and somewhere in between. In terms of the letter, once again, for Lindy, just a conversation of, Miss Escape, Miss Freedom, from her getting away from the church, figuring out who she is, not feeling bad for herself, realizing that every step that she took was a part of her larger journey and accepting that she had to go through those things to become who she is today. And for Miguel, he always felt like an outsider. I thought it was a really powerful conversation where he was talking about how he was, too Latino for the white people and he was too white for the Latino people. So when you're essentially always caught in the middle, you go into situations hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. And that kind of leads into his pessimistic mindset that we touched on earlier. So it's kind of trying to meter those two sides of him, right? You know, go into the situation with good expectations, but also kind of not always expect the worst in a pessimistic way, but be able to kind of meter your expectations in a sense. So interesting combo there. And y'all, I think that's really all I wanted to talk about on this episode. So if you liked what I said, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on all social media at DatDamnDasher. And until next time, y'all, don't just show up, be present. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.